We have published over at nimdzi.com some articles and research around localization effectiveness and return on localization investment. So I'd encourage you guys to go reach out over there and see what Nimdzi has to say. But today, I wanted to take a look at what some of the other experts in the industry have to say. So we're going to start with a gentleman that many of you guys may know by the name of Ben Sargent. Ben Sargent's been around the industry for a very long time. He's currently over at Group Q doing basically what we're doing here at Nimdzi, research and consulting over there. And I like to start with this example because I found this article written in Software Business called Calculating the ROI in Software Localization by Ben Sargent. And this article is about 20 years old. And I like to talk about this because it shows this is a conversation measuring the ROI of localization. It's a conversation we've been having for a very long time. And 20 years ago, we're very much at the same boat that we're in now, which is it's a very challenging metric to measure. So in the article, we look at different things to measure, things like market share, brand equity, competition, cost of support, customer satisfaction, and expectations. Some alternative enablement metrics, I would say, rather than ROI. Moving on to our next example, our next expert here. Many of you know Natalie Kelly. For those of you that have been following the alignment series, I believe she was a guest last time on the most recent episode. And if you don't know Natalie Kelly, go over to her blog, borntobeglobal.com. She is a wealth of knowledge in our industry. And what Natalie has to say is, quote, asking localization teams to figure out their ROI, that's a bit like asking the finance department to compute ROI, or the HR department, or the facilities teams, or any other function that is simply mission critical for doing business, if you're international, that is. Instead, it's better to focus on impact. So Ms. Kelly's recommendation here is ROI is kind of, if you're asking about ROI, return on investment of localization, we might be asking the wrong question. Perhaps it's better to focus on other metrics such as impact. Moving on, last but not least, in my example here, I have many more, but I selected these three for y'all today. Jeff Beatty is currently over at Disney, heading up localization over there. And I was actually just chatting with him yesterday, I believe. But he writes, ROI is an inaccurate and false metric for localization, feature development, and release engineering. The list goes on because it's based on often false assumptions and prophetic predictions about the market. Translation is a revenue enabler, not a revenue generator. I'm going to say that again. Translation is a revenue enabler, not a revenue generator. Because we try to fit it into the generator concept, we get stuck with the false ROI metric. The enablement concept can clear the way for us to focus on opportunity, outcomes, purpose, and process, and less on moving units. And I love how he just sums this up here because we're talking about revenue enablement, not revenue generation. And when we're trying to chase that holy grail of return on localization investment, sometimes we're missing out on something that's going to be much more effective for our cause, which is enablement. So how do we track and report on enablement? And moving on here, in 3 words, we need to measure what matters. So many localization programs out there are reporting false KPIs, or as Jeff would say, false KPIs, vanity metrics, what I classify here as operational KPIs. Now, operational KPIs are important to the management of an effective localization program, but they don't paint the bigger picture that's going to be interesting to the leadership team. So here on screen, if you're watching this live rather than listening to the podcast, we have a Venn diagram. Let's go back here. We have a Venn diagram with operational KPIs and strategic KPIs. Operation KPIs are focused on localization. We're talking about time to delivery. We're talking about quality, time, quality, and cost, essentially. The metrics that we know and love in localization. Strategic KPIs are the ones that senior management is concerned about. And in between these, we have the leadership gap. This is the gap between what we're currently reporting and tracking and what would allow us to show localization as a true revenue enablement function. Moving on to the next slide, we just have some quick examples here. These are very marketing focused examples here, but some KPIs that we could start tracking today: average revenue per user, conversion rate, average order value, email opt-in, lifetime value, customer retention rate, customer acquisition cost, drop-off rate, monthly active users, daily active users, localized A/B test, and non-English customer experience. Once again, these are just some examples. So to summarize, we need to take a look at metrics that matter. We need to be measuring what matters. And those metrics are going to be focused on performance and growth, and shifting from reporting on quality, like your traditional LQA quality KPIs, to what is the value. Not to say that those aren't related concepts, but they are different. So rather than focusing on quality, we're focusing on what is the value that our localized products are bringing to our end customer. So where do we go from here? How do we take action moving forward? And they're happy to chat offline with anybody that wants to brainstorm on this. There's many different avenues available for all of us. But today, I just have three questions that you can ask yourself about your program, your localization program. The first, what data do we currently track that could be blended with market specific data from the localization team? We have access to a lot of data in the localization team that other teams don't have access to. By itself, it might not be very valuable to, especially to from a senior strategic leadership perspective, but blended with data from the finance department, from the user experience and customer engagement department, from the support department, from the marketing department, blended with that data, it becomes much more powerful and tells a much better story. Question number two, what mechanisms do we have in place to proactively capture feedback from local markets instead of just waiting for complaints to be escalated? I'll rephrase this. How are you engaging your local markets? How are you engaging your international users? As the localization team, we can take that responsibility of being ambassadors for our global consumers, our global customers. How are we capturing feedback from them proactively so that we can provide that to inform strategic decisions company-wide? And lastly, what can we learn from other global brands about how to define success criteria, key performance indicator, and ROI for localization activities? You're not alone. You're not the first person to have this challenge. You're not the first localization department to have, what I like to refer to as kind of an existential crisis. Like, what are we doing? What value are we adding? There are plenty of other teams that have come before you. I can refer you to, if you download the deck after this, go to the Alignment webinar website. They'll have the deck of all today's slides. There'll be a slide in there about the Nimdzi Lessons in Localization series. It's a great series where you can see how localization is done and managed at other organizations. That's just one resource available to you. Professional networking, of course, is another resource available to you. So I encourage you, everybody that you see in chat, all of your colleagues here today, reach out to them, network with them, add all of these panelists on LinkedIn. It's a good group of people, and you're going to want to be in their network. And with that,